Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington. He's the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. Hearing all the new details from the meeting with Zelensky, who's offering to give up territory to create a demilitarized zone, also asking for 15 years plus of U.S. security guarantees. What should all of that look like when you consider whether or not Congress would have to weigh in as to whether or not that is actually possible to give 15 plus years, potentially more, of security guarantees?
Well, I think it's key to the agreement on the Ukrainian side, certainly, and I think we can do that. And the security guarantees can mean a lot of different things. And remember, we've got a 53-nation coalition. This doesn't just fall on the United States. Europe has been very involved, as have some other countries. But it's key that security guarantees are present. Otherwise, it's not going to help because Russia will simply attack again later. I think that the most worrisome thing right now is what's coming out of Russia and Putin. They don't seem as anxious for an agreement as President Trump and President Zelensky are. And that's why it's so crucial that we continue to restate our support for Ukraine, to put the pressure on Putin for a change. I think this biggest mistake that President Trump has made in the last year is he seems to think that Zelensky is the one who's controlling whether or not this war ends, when in fact Putin is the one who started the war and is driving it. Pressure needs to be put on Putin. We need to get sanctions back on the table. We need to make it clear that we're not abandoning Ukraine and make it clear that Putin's not going to be able to take over Ukraine as he wants. That's what forces Putin to the table. I think the security guarantees we can do, but the question right now is, how's Russia going to react to all that?
I was just going to ask you if you have seen any concessions on Russia's part during all this, because just before this meeting began with Zelensky, there was a sustained attack on Kyiv, one of the longest sustained attacks we've seen during the war.
Yeah, I have not. President Trump keeps muttering about how Putin wants peace and a variety of different other comments he's been making. There's some comment yesterday at the press conference where Trump said that, Putin is willing to help rebuild Ukraine. I don't think President Trump fundamentally understands where Putin is coming from on this. Putin wants to basically control all of Ukraine one way or the other. And the only way to dissuade him from that is to show that it's not possible. To show that the coalition that I just mentioned is united behind the idea that there must be a sovereign democratic Ukraine, and we will give them security guarantees to make sure that's happening. And also another point that doesn't get made often enough, Russia's really struggling in this war. I think another major mistake that President Trump has made is he keeps talking about how Zelensky doesn't have any cards and he's losing and Russia is winning. Russia is burning through an unbelievable amount of casualties and equipment to gain tiny little bits of ground. They are basically stalled in their effort. And I think that message needs to get out there again so that Putin realizes that his maximalist goals will not be achieved. Continuing to talk, as President Trump has, about how Zelensky is losing undermines the entire effort to try to get to a peace agreement. And it's also not true.
I do want to move on to another conflict that the Trump administration is now dealing with, the phase 2 of the peace deal that is yet to materialize when it comes to Israel and Gaza. Hamas has not disarmed. Israel's defense minister has said Israel will never leave Gaza, which goes against one of the important parts of Trump's plan. Meantime, of course, there is a vast amount of suffering by Palestinians in war-devastated Gaza. What levers do you think that Donald Trump needs to use to try and get phase 2 underway?
Well, the big key here is moving in other international forces, is working particularly with the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Egypt, who have long said that they believe they have Palestinians that they can work with as an alternative to Hamas. That's the key in all that. That alternative has to be put forward, and Israel has to be willing to work with that alternative. I don't disagree with Israel at all that keeping Hamas in place in Gaza is a major, major problem for peace going forward. It's also, by the way, a major problem for the Palestinian people. Hamas has been devastating for the Palestinian people, and including the fact, of course, that they regularly execute Palestinians who dare to disagree with them. But in order to get rid of Hamas, you have to have something else. And here, I don't think Israel has been willing enough to embrace possible alternatives. They're hostile to just about any Palestinian group that pops up. And also, I want to say what's going on in the West Bank undermines the Gaza peace plan as well. As long as Israeli settlers continue to grab more land in the West Bank, that just undermines the ability to find those Palestinian alternatives. So I think all of that is connected if we're going to get to a peace agreement. But again, the key here is you don't like Hamas, and I don't, very few people do. You better have an alternative. And I've heard from the King of Jordan, from MBS in Saudi Arabia, they believe there are alternatives, but those alternatives need to be embraced, encouraged, and helped so that they can become viable.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a complex scenario that has to be worked through, and there are so many people suffering through it. Congressman Adam Smith, thank you so much, and please do try to have a happy holiday.